All right, this one's a difficult one to review because in some ways, this Galaxy Book5 Pro 360 16-inch convertible has improvements that I think are really worthy of noting here. In fact, they got an anti-glare coating on this gorgeous 2.8K AMOLED display, Super AMOLED, Dynamic 2X, whatever the hell they're calling it. It's really good. It's got 120 hertz. It's got a pretty thick bottom bezel, as you see there, but that's not why this is difficult to review. That's the easy part. And they actually put a nice anti-glare coating on it, but that's the easy part. What's the hard part is that overall, it's a really good convertible, especially if you're looking for a new Lunar Lake laptop with a convertible hinge and, of course, a 16-inch display. This is the only one so far. And in a lot of ways, this certainly nailed it because you're getting better battery life, you're getting more efficiency, and an overall premium build. That's not a surprise here. We've seen that with other Lunar Lakes, and the overall takeaway is it's very good. But there are some things holding it back. Some of the things that I thought the Galaxy Book 4 lineup was lacking are here as well. Let's talk about it. We got the keyboard here, which is okay, but it's got a lot of it's got shallow key travel. There's very little throw on there, so not the best keyboard out there. And I was hoping for a little bit more key travel. I do understand this is super thin, super light, but a little bit more key travel would have been better. No haptic touchpad. Remember, this is a $1,700 device, and we'll get to the price in a little bit, but $1,700, I expect a haptic touchpad at this point. MacBook Pros get it, MacBook Airs get it, the Microsoft Surface laptop has it, other laptops have it, the X1 Carbon Gen 13, the X1 2-in-1. I think you all get the picture here. You're spending over $1,500 here, specifically $1,700. We should be getting a haptic touchpad. We don't get it. Now, the other problem here is the price, as I just mentioned. $1,700. You don't get 32 gigabytes of RAM. This only has 16 gigabytes of RAM. That's a problem because no option here, at least here in North America or here in the US, I could not buy anything above 16 gigabytes of RAM. There's only one model, and this is it. I bought it. Now, Samsung didn't send it to me, but that's another story. This has only got 16 gigabytes of RAM, and for some of us who need more than that, this is not going to cut it. Now, I remember they reserved the 32 gigabyte option for the Book Ultra lineup last year, the Book 4 Ultra. Maybe we'll see a Book 5 Ultra with at least 32 gigabytes of RAM, but not released yet. So this is your only option, 16 gigabytes. And at $1,700 plus tax here in Nevada, that's a lot to pay. And to not get a premium feature that should be at a minimum on that type of device, that's a shame. Now, overall, you're going to get a lot of good things out of this. So what could have been a spectacular device is still a good device, a very good, maybe great 2-in-1 convertible, but was held back by the shortcomings that I found last year. So no improvements. The song remains the same, basically. So we're going to get into it more, why I think this is still a great 2-in-1 16 convertible. I just wish it could have been exceptional, could have been spectacular, a missed opportunity in my book. Hey everybody, it's Andrew, and this is my review of the Samsung Galaxy Book5 Pro 360, all new for 2024. Coming up. Now, if you follow my channel, you know I reviewed every iteration of the Galaxy Book 4 lineup, the Book 4 Ultra, the Book 4 Pro 360, and the Book 4 Pro 14, and of course, most recently, the Galaxy Book 4 Edge running the Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite. They're all very good, but they all had their problems. But one of the biggest issues I had was the price point, and they came in very high, and you get very little premium features for the money considering what you're paying. The same can be said of the Galaxy Book 5 Pro 360. Now, I went out and I spent my own money on this. Samsung did not send me any review unit. In fact, they never return any of my emails at this point. When I wonder why. But anyway, $1,700 I spent plus tax here in Las Vegas, Nevada. So we're looking at quite a bit of amount of money here. But you get the Core Ultra 7, the Series 2. This is the Core Ultra 7 256V. Now, what does that mean? Well, you're getting only 16 gigabytes of RAM. I'm not joking here, people. This is only 16 gigabytes of RAM at a price point of $1,700. That's unacceptable. You get a terabyte of storage, storage. I think it should be 2 terabytes at this price point. That's just me, but of course you could always upgrade it yourself. Comes in the gray color. I don't know any other colors here, but I think that's a lot of money to pay for not getting 32 gigabytes of RAM and no haptic touchpad, by the way. Another high-end premium feature that should be on any laptop over $1,500 in my opinion. That's just my take on it. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But for those that are interested, I will leave links for everything in the description below for more information and where you can buy them. Of course, it is an affiliate link, so I will get a small commission if you choose to buy through me. Now, don't get me wrong. These are very good products. They could be even better. They could be the greatest products if they made a few tweaks here and there, as we'll get into here in this review. You're looking at a very premium all-metal design with very little, if no, give in the chassis. It is a rock-solid build, MacBook-like build, so it's on the high end, of course, and we would expect that at a $1,700 price point. But that being said, there is no give or flex. Now, there is a little bit of screen wobble when typing and when you push the lid, of course, because it does have a 360-degree hinge, which is kind of normal, but I would like to see a little bit less screen wobble. And at 1.7 kilograms or 3 pounds, 12 ounces, this is a pretty portable 16-inch convertible considering how thin this is. It's pretty amazing in terms of the engineering, how they were able to get so much into this very thin chassis. That is pretty amazing in my book. All right, let's check out the port selection. And on the left side is an HDMI 2.1 port, and then you get 2 USB Type-C Thunderbolt 4 ports that are full function. And moving over to the right side is your micro SD card reader. Kind of wish that was a full-size SD card reader, especially at a 16-inch convertible device here. Would have been great. Then you also get a USB Type-A port, and you get a 3.5 millimeter microphone headphone combo jack. I would say all in all, a good port selection here. One little nitpick, as you know, I want to see those 2 USB Type-C Thunderbolt 4 ports split up, one on each side. We don't get that, but overall, pretty good port selection nonetheless. Okay, let's get into performance, and this is running the brand new Lunar Lake processor from Intel. This one is the Intel Core Ultra 7 256V, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and of course, 1 terabyte of storage. Now, this Geekbench 6 here is showing a little bit better multi-core performance, that's for sure, but we're seeing less multi-core, and that makes sense because when you look at Meteor Lake, which has 16 cores, 22 threads, we now are down to 8 cores, 8 threads, and we lose the hyper-threading that you get on Meteor Lake. But that being said, the overall efficiency and better battery life certainly outweigh the little bit less multi-core performance we're getting here. So the overall package, I think, is better year over year. Now, the same could be said of the Cinebench 2024, better single core, less multi-core. And that's, again, been the theme here so far. But when you're doing your everyday tasks, say Microsoft Office, email, web browsing, consuming media, everything was very snappy, fluid. There were no hiccups, no slowdowns whatsoever. Worked very well. And like the other Lunar Lake devices we looked at, we're seeing a marked improvement when it comes to the integrated graphics. 3D Mark scores here are better, and that's because this is running the Intel Arc 140V graphics, which are a step up over last year's Intel Arc graphics. Better Time Spy, better Firestrike, and a better Wildlife Extreme test. And when I ran the Time Spy stress test to see if this will thermal throttle under heavy load, great news here, it got a 99% passing score, meaning it detected virtually no thermal throttling under load. And that's been pretty good overall in terms of Lunar Lake and some of the other devices that I looked at, and it's certainly pretty stable in terms of the frame rate when we look at other devices in the category. So overall, pretty good when it comes to frame rate stability here. And the same could be said of the surface temperatures remaining relatively cool, even where you place your fingers on the keyboard, never getting overly hot. Now, the heating vent below the display above the keyboard certainly gets hot because that's where the heat is going to dissipate. That makes sense. On the bottom, it remained relatively cool, even pushing this under load. So Lunar Lake has been very efficient when it comes to not only battery life, but also keeping this cool and quiet as well. And speaking of fan noise here, the only time you'll get over 40 decibels or so, maybe 45 decibels, is when you're really pushing this gaming under heavy load, heavy 4K video editing, or something that really pushes this to the limit. And it wasn't a high whirl or anything like that, a pretty low whirl in terms of whether or not you're going to notice it all that much. But when you're doing everyday tasks, Microsoft Office, email, web browsing, consuming media, the fans hardly kicked in here. So that's been pretty good. Now, to get inside this laptop, it's actually pretty easy. Remove the 4 feet on the bottom. They pop off and they're easily pop back in. They make it really easy in that regard. And remove the 4 Phillips head screws, pop off the bottom plate with a guitar pick and a pry tool, or a pry tool, I should say, and you're in. So once you do that, that is pretty easy to see what's inside. Now, taking a peek inside here, you'll notice that the battery, of course, is a pretty large size battery, but I can't help but wonder, could they have put even a bigger battery on it? We'll get into the battery life in a little bit, and spoiler alert, it is actually really good here, and I'm not surprised with what we've been seeing out of the Lunar Lake in terms of efficiency, so we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, as far as the 2 fans for cooling, we'll get into the thermal performance, and you'll notice that SSD there, it's a full-size M.2 2280, and for some reason, we know Samsung makes their own SSDs, but they refuse to put them in their own devices, which is kind of puzzling because we're seeing less than average speeds here, especially for a Gen 4, and I'm not quite sure why they're skimping on this, not using their own SSDs. This is a Kyosho, whatever how you pronounce it, but obviously I'd like to see Samsung SSDs in their own laptop line. Kind of puzzling why they're not doing that. Certainly fast enough, what you need to do in this laptop in terms of the reads and writes, but just kind of puzzling why they're not using their own SSDs. Now, the RAM, of course, is integrated into the system on a chip here with Lunar Lake, so it's not upgradable by the user, and since we're with the Core Ultra 7 256V, we're using 16 gigabytes of RAM here, no option for higher unless you get one with the 258V, which not available here in North America. Maybe it's available in other regions, but here you can only buy the 256V, so only 16 gigabytes of RAM, and at $1,700, that is a shame. That's a really a big shame because this should have at least 32 gigabytes of RAM at this high price point. They're pulling an Apple here, and it's not good. And as far as the wireless, Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.4, so the latest and greatest here. It is soldered into the motherboard, not upgradable by the user, but I've had no issues with the Wi-Fi or the Bluetooth. Now, we're seeing a big improvement when it comes to battery life. That's because Lunar Lake is more efficient. We're looking at a 76 watt-hour battery here, and as you can see, year over year over the Book5 Pro 360 that I looked at, same battery size, better battery life. So we're looking at 19 hours, 47 minutes on the Modern Office test. We're looking at over 18 hours video playback on that same test. We were getting 13 hours and 37 minutes on the Modern Office, and the video playback was 14 hours on that Galaxy Book4 Pro 360. So a nice improvement year over year. We're seeing better gaming performance in terms of battery life over the Book4 Pro 360. So this is an excellent choice here for those that need longevity, and especially want that 16-inch display. It's gorgeous, giving you that extra screen real estate, so really good in that regard. Now, when it comes to charging, they include a 65-watt fast charge adapter in the box. It's pretty compact and travel-friendly. Now, if you caught my review of the Samsung Galaxy Book4 Edge running the Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite, you know that clamshell had a gorgeous 16-inch dynamic AMOLED display, or whatever they're calling it, dynamic AMOLED 2X display, whatever. It's a great display. It has a multi-touch layer, but no pen support. Now, here on this one, since it is a convertible, there is pen support with the S Pen included here, 16 inches, AMOLED display, 2880 by 1800, 2.8K resolution. It has a really good anti-reflective coating here, so they've really toned down a lot of the screen glare and reflections that plagued the previous iteration, so it's good in that regard. It's a bright display here. They claim 400 nits. I got 391 standard dynamic range. It can peak over 500 nits in HDR, so that's been pretty good. It also has excellent coverage of the color gamut. This is going to be great for pro-level color grading, Lightroom, Photoshop, video editing, and the like. It's also extremely color accurate, but with any OLED display, you have to watch out for PWM or screen flickering. I detected it below 30 or 40% screen brightness, so you just have to be careful with that, especially if you are sensitive to PWM. And you also have to be concerned about screen burn-in down the road. Leaving a static image on the display may have burn-in down the road. Again, I haven't experienced that with any of the modern OLED displays from Samsung here, but the bottom line is it's something that it does have to be considered here. Now, they do have a screensaver and all that stuff, but again, just keep that in mind. Now, that being said, the multi-touch layer worked well. Navigating the OS with your finger, pinch to zoom, all worked very well. And the S Pen, what is there to say? It's a great opportunity to take notes, sketch out artwork. It works really well. It's got 4,096 levels of pressure sensitivity, and it works along the Galaxy line here. I was able to use the same pen on my Galaxy S10 Ultra as well as on other devices, so it's working really good, including the S24 Ultra, by the way. So the S Pen really does have good seamless integration here. And the way to store it is magnetically on the lid. It's a pretty decent secure connection, but when you're carrying this in your bag, I would put it in a pocket to make sure you don't lose it. Now, overall, I think the package here is pretty good, especially with this really nice display. Now, the one thing I do notice here is a really thick bottom bezel. That's because this is a 360-degree device. You will be putting it into the different modes, but the other bezels are pretty thin in that regard. Now, putting it into the different modes, that means the tent mode, of course, which is great for, say, recipes in the kitchen, giving presentations. The same for the stand mode, or I like to call presentation mode. And then, of course, the tablet mode, great for use with the S Pen. Now, the S Pen has been great so far for taking notes, as I mentioned, and the overall pressure sensitivity, the palm rejection is all excellent here, done by Samsung. So this is that 2-megapixel camera here on the Samsung Galaxy Book5 Pro 360. This is 1080p. What do you think about the video quality? What do you think about the audio quality? Now, this is not an IR camera. That means you cannot log in with face recognition with Windows Hello. You'll have to use that fingerprint scanner. Remember, the power button doubles as the fingerprint scanner. But what do you think about the video quality? Again, this is a Copilot Plus PC or an AI PC, so you're going to have the NPU to handle a lot of all of this, actually. So you have the background blur, the auto framing, all the studio effects are here, all the different filters and so forth. So that will be handled by that. I think they're saying 47, 48 tops or something like that in these new Lunar Lake CPUs, of course, with this new Lunar Lake chipset, I should say. But again, what do you think about it? Let me know in the comments section below. Now, if you caught any of my reviews of the Galaxy Book line over the years, you know one of my biggest complaints was the keyboard, and more specifically, the shallow nature of the keyboard. The key travel was just not cutting it, and this supposedly has better tactility over the Galaxy Book 4 Edge that I reviewed, and I would say maybe slightly better, although the key travel is still very shallow to me, especially when you want to type out long documents, emails, your fingers sort of bottom out, and I don't like that. I want to have more throw on these keys, and it's just not there. Now, that being said, you can still type on this perfectly fine. It's still a good experience, but I would say it could have been that much better with a little bit more key travel. It's not going to be a ThinkPad keyboard. It's not going to be even the Surface device keyboard that we saw on the Microsoft Surface Laptop 7 and so forth. It's even not quite as good as the MacBook Pro keyboard, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but this certainly is a shallow keyboard, and I was hoping for an improvement here. We didn't get it. Now, it does have a numeric keypad. Not the best layout, of course. It's not a proper layout for the number crunchers. That being said, it does move the touchpad off center, which some people complain about. You get used to it, but still, it does move it off center. Now, let's talk about the touchpad. The touchpad is a huge touchpad here. It's a glass touchpad, but unfortunately, $1,700, this should have at a minimum a haptic touchpad at this point. This is ridiculous. This has been a chief complaint of mine over the years, especially when you're paying a premium here. You're not getting premium features. Haptic touchpad is a must. It's not there. Now, that being said, scrolling, doing all the gestures was very responsive on it. I had no issue with it. It's just that why are we not getting a haptic touchpad at this point from Samsung? It's just bewildering to me, and I'm not really sure why. Now, as far as the overall experience with the keyboard and the touchpad, I would say it is certainly adequate. You can certainly get the job done here to type out documents, emails, and the like. But again, there are some shortcomings here, and none of them were addressed, as far as I'm concerned, with this Galaxy Book5 Pro 360. And by the way, those wondering, the multi-stage backlight worked pretty well. It does get pretty bright, and against the dark keys, the LED backlight is certainly visible. So if you're in an airplane or a dark environment, you certainly can get work done on that. All right, so if it's anything like the previous iterations, it has some pretty good sound, of course. All right, let's bring it all home. And the Samsung Galaxy Book 5 Pro 360 does have some improvements, including Lunar Lake, which is a more efficient processor, gives you better battery life, it runs cool and quiet, but that's pretty much across the line of any Lunar Lake device so far. But the song remains the same when it comes to the negatives that I found in the previous versions, and they seem to still be here. That being said, 16 gigabytes of RAM is simply not enough here in 2024, especially if you're charging $1,700 for this product. You also get a very shallow key travel, which I really am not a big fan of. And for this high price point, we're not getting a haptic touchpad, and I think that's a shame because this really should have a haptic touchpad at this point, but we don't get that. There's no IR camera once again. This is, again, one thing that I'm really seeing as a theme here with Samsung throughout, and I think that's just a shame because all the others in this price point do have a IR camera, except, of course, Apple, which doesn't have one, but that's okay. And we have slower SSD speeds than the competition, and it still has some screen wobble. So these are the negatives that needed to be improved, but we're not done here in this generation, and which is a bit disappointing here. Now, the good parts, of course, is that gorgeous 16-inch AMOLED display. It's got 120 hertz refresh rate. It's got the S Pen, which works really great. It's got good seamless integrations with other Galaxy devices and so forth. So that's been pretty good. And this is a really overall good convertible, especially if you want that large screen with that real estate you're getting with that. That's going to be really great. But at $1,699, you're not getting a lot of the premium features you should be getting. It's still a great convertible. It could have been even greater had it had those high-end premium features, especially at this high price point. So please hit the like button, please subscribe, please share this video. Don't forget to leave a comment in that comment section below. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know if there's a device or something out there you think I should review. I'll do my best to try to make that happen. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. And don't forget to check out my website, amdtechreviews.com. So until next time, this is Andrew, and I'll see you in the next video.